Casey Desantis has launched a new campaign, Mamas for Desantis. Let's watch.
In America, we've witnessed a lot and put up with enough.
You guys gotta go.
He is arresting her for being on a public playground. Her kids are here. What is
We've been forced into silence. Into compliance. Told that we must trust the science.
Indoor and outdoor venues should be closed.
We've been told that we must deny truth, back down, and look the other way. But enough is enough. When you come after our kids, we fight back. Because there's nothing we won't do to protect our children. They're not yours.
These are our kids.
Our nation's children are all our children.
We will not.
All right, Jessica, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this ad. What do you think?
I just don't think political campaigns should ever be giving horror film. It's giving horror film. I think that if you have a policy platform that addresses some issue pertaining to children and the role of mothers in our society, talk about what laws you would like to change, what policies are in place right now, what your solution is. We didn't get any of that. We understand that the vibe was very much there's a problem with the transgender people in the United States and that children are being groomed and they shouldn't be forced to wear masks and they should be allowed to go to schools during the pandemic. We got that from the imagery and some of the commentary, but I just don't feel that this was the kind of political ad that sends a clear message about what the policy platform is and specifically what policies you want to change. And I think that's necessary for political ads. I think it could be misleading for many people.
Yeah, I don't know if there was more of the ad that we didn't show on the program, but I think after that part where she says, you know, when you come after our kids, we fight back, that's where you launch into, okay, here's what my husband did to try to protect kids from these various threats that you just saw. I agree it was a little aggressive in terms of the negativity, but I agreed with all of the issues that she was highlighting, whether it's protecting women's sports from biological men or preventing the forced masking of children who were 2-3 years old, whether they were on planes or in school, or preventing them from playing at the park. I think those are issues that do resonate with parents, especially when we saw the Virginia movement of school board parents ahead of the gubernatorial election in 2019. A lot of parents were really upset by things that they saw happening in their kids' schools. A lot of their kids were out of school for quite some period of time that led to learning loss and a lot of emotional and mental disorders. When they finally went back to school, they were told that they either had to wear masks or get the vaccine or both. And this was something that really bothered a lot of parents because the science did not suggest that kids were at any particular grave threat of either getting a serious case of COVID or giving it to other people. So this is effective, I think, and especially in Florida where the COVID policies were a lot laxer. But I think you're right that they needed to connect the dots a little bit better in between what the threats were and then how the Desantis family, because apparently they're running as a team now, intended to combat those or did in the past.
Yeah, I think the Mamas for Desantis coming from Casey Desantis is a very weird vibe. We try and avoid this idea of like a political regime being a family in the United States. I think that's why a lot of people didn't particularly appreciate the Clintons. But I think when it comes to communicating policies about children, you have to be very clear because I could watch that same video of the kid crying in a public space, being told to wear a mask and say, yeah, the kid had to wear a mask because there were a lot of people in the public spaces that I was in that were not wearing masks. And if you're a mother and you want to protect your kids and you know this might prevent some of the virus from getting into their mouths, you might say, okay, now my job as a mother has been made more difficult by this policy not being enforced as much. And these people coming into public spaces and putting other people at risk when if they don't want to wear the mask, they should do that on their own private property instead of putting other people at risk, right? That message could be taken in a completely different way. And when it comes to the issue of transgender athletes, that's been made such a big deal. And it's been made a much larger deal than it is a problem that exists in our society. I think when you see that the transgender population in the United States is about 2% of people, it's like there are policies that are on people's minds much more. Does it matter for a mother if she can provide for her kids, or her and her husband or whoever her partner is can provide for her kids? Is there economic opportunity? There's a reason that jobs in the economy are pulling at the number one issue. That's an issue for mothers as well, and it's probably one that impacts more than people being transgender and playing sports.
Yeah, I actually agree that some economic messaging in the Mamas for Desantis movement, I guess is what they're calling it, would be helpful and probably very effective, considering that is a top issue for voters. But I don't think that, we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And although that transgender people are a small percentage of the population, that's an issue that does matter for a girl who has dreams of going to become a college athlete, or who has dreams of winning a state championship. And it's an issue of basic fairness. And so the reason that people identify with that issue and why it has become a bigger problem is because these cases are so obviously unjust, and they end up becoming nationalized, because when you watch a biological male blow a woman out of the water in a 100-meter dash or in the pool, everyone can see that for what it is.
Yeah, I think for me, I know that there are a lot of men that I could smoke in a 100-meter dash or whatever. I think, the physical form you're born with and how much of an athlete you are isn't always something that's clear across gender. I think someone who's on HRT or taking estrogen and participating in sports, I think you'd probably find that they couldn't outperform a lot of male athletes. I think it's very dependent on the kind of build that you have. And so I don't know what the right solution is that will make everyone happy, because I don't think that there even is one. But I think that to include people in sports who want to play the sports with people whose gender they identify with, that should be fine. They should be allowed to compete. And I think people are born with all kinds of different bodies. And I think if we put kids on puberty blockers early enough, who were clear that they were transgender or started transitioning early, we'll find that they have a comparable physical form to a lot of other women. Most people who transition, because this is the issue that I think matters more to people, is people who transition from being gender assigned at birth of male and transitioning to female, that there's the concern that they'll be much stronger and what have you. But the earlier that happens, actually the physical form, that when you look at someone, it's very hard to tell the difference. And I heard this even from tiny towns in conservative places like Mount Ayr in Iowa, where they say, yeah, we know a girl who transitioned very young, and we all support her. And these were people who were very conservative, who voted for Donald Trump. And so I think by making the issue taboo and a larger problem than it actually exists in our society comes from a place of fear rather than genuinely caring about fairness.
There's a lot to unpack there from the biological differences between men and women in sports. I mean, for example, if you look at Serena and Venus Williams, who said that they could be, the 300th ranked male, they ended up getting destroyed by them, because although there are obviously going to be cases where a woman can defeat a male because she's a professional athlete and he's not, we do know that based on muscle density, height, weight, and other factors between men and women, there is a larger gap in basic performative metrics between a man and a woman who are at the same sports level, who are at the same competitive level. And so that's where the issue of unfairness comes in, where you have a man who might be ranked in the hundreds if they were competing against other men, but all of a sudden when they're competing against other women, they're the best in the field, because there is that just innate biological superior advantage. And then on the issue of puberty blockers, basically what you're saying is that in order to level the playing field, we don't just say men can't compete with women. Instead, we put children even earlier on a life-altering chemical treatment that can render them sterile, have them develop brittle bone disease, have them develop mental issues, and not give them the opportunity to detransition if they choose, because these treatments do end up causing permanent side effects. I don't think that's the answer to making sports fair.
I think when you compare Venus and Serena Williams playing a man in tennis, they didn't play a transgender woman, they played a man. And I think there is a difference between someone who has gone through hormone therapy and has transitioned to become a female and someone who is a man. Transgender women are not men. They're different in their physical makeup, and they're different when it comes to their gender identity as well. It's not just something that's going on mentally, it's something that's very physical as well, the transition process. I think puberty blockers are something that is a decision between children and their parents and their doctor. And of course, there are all kinds of other medical practices that people elect to be involved with. They elect to take different kinds of drugs and have different medical procedures that are life-altering. And I think we find this one in particular to be more taboo because of our social feelings about gender. And so puberty blockers are an alternative. Maybe if you're talking to your kid and they're not really sure if they want to transition, but they have some feelings, to prevent them from actually developing into a gender that they don't want to be. So it's just something that allows the child more time to decide for themselves, rather than having the parents say, okay, well, it sounds like, you do want to transition, let's get you started on hormone therapy. It can prevent them from developing into having male parts and having male bone structure and having male muscle mass when they actually want to be a woman and compete in women's sports maybe one day. And so I think in the interest of freedom and parents making choices about their kids, which I think is something that Casey DeSantis does want, we should let parents make that decision with their kids. And I don't think it's really about fairness when you're comparing men and women, when we should be comparing transgender women and women who play sports on the same team or compete against each other.
Well, even transgender women, as you put it, who are on hormone therapy still retain a distinct physical advantage over a biological woman. And although I do support parental choice, as does Casey DeSantis, we don't support child abuse. And I think the question that we need to ask is, what if that hypothetical child you're talking about ultimately decides that they do want to be a man and they wish maybe that those secondary sex characteristics hadn't been suppressed by hormone therapy? Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll be back with more Rising after this.